Huppenthal, this question is to you. Do you agree with the Common Core standards that are found in the College and Career Ready standards? Second part of the question is this: is there any authority in the Constitution for the federal government to impose these educational standards on the states?
I have never supported the Common Core standards. I have blocked the Common Core science standards. They're known as next generation standards. Some people don't say that, well, that's not Common Core, they're next generation science standards, but they're coming out of the same groups that produced the math and English language arts standards. I went in there and analyzed those standards and said, the earth sciences standards, those aren't science standards, those are indoctrination standards, calling for our students to be indoctrinated into a theory that man causes climate change, causes global warming. I said, I will not accept that. I blocked it. Other states have just accepted those. So I blocked the science standards. I had blocked Common Core literature. They had books in there, The Bluest Eyes, Dreaming in Cuban, that were absolutely pornography. I stripped those out of our standards, any kind of recommended book list. I blocked Common Core literature. A lot of people have been bringing Sandra Stotsky into Arizona and advocating for her ideas. The Bluest Eyes is on her literature list. She brought that in as a mandatory book in Massachusetts. I don't find that acceptable. That book is horrendous, horrendous. So we have blocked Common Core literature, and we are absolutely opposed to Common Core history. I have such reverence for this country that comes from my basic values. My mom taking me to the library and reading about the history of this book. I get down on my hands and knees and kiss the earth because of the opportunity that I've had to grow up in such a great country that was formed by our founding fathers. And very few people, policymakers, know the history of that period from 1776 on through to 1787, that period of time of all the work that was done by Alexander Hamilton and the others who developed the Constitution. I have absolute reverence for that. We are blocking all of these attempts, Howard Zinn, etc., who are out there trying to rewrite America's great history. I'm absolutely blocking Common Core history. We are now ready to go into hearings on the math and English language arts standards. And this is not an easy battle, folks. Somebody can get up and say up here bombastically, I support, I'm going to abolish Alma School Road on Monday. That's ridiculous. What are you going to do, erase it off the map? Send out trucks to rip up all the pavement? Our standards are big, monstrous things that have to be dealt with. I have laid out the battle plan. We're ready to deal with it. We know how to get rid of Common Core. Now, do I support phonics and English language phonics and to teach reading in kindergarten? You better believe it. There are some things in our standards right now that are beautiful conservative victories. I'm going to keep those, and we're going to get rid of the crap.
Mrs. Douglas.
I made some notes. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of thunderstruck, quite frankly. Mr. Huppenthal says that he doesn't support Common Core standards, but we have a long over 3.5-year history of him being out, going around this state and telling people that these are the standards that we absolutely have to have for our children. Many argue that what bound us to the Common Core standards is the race to the top money. It's Mr. Huppenthal's signature that is on the third application that brought the money here to the state of Arizona. And we just got a tiny little bit of money, ladies and gentlemen. Let me put it in perspective for you. $25 million, half of it was kept for bureaucracy at our State Department of Education. So roughly $12.5 million went out to the school districts. We have over 1 million K-12 children, so our children were sold out for less than $12.50 per child. Oh, over 3 years, so maybe $4 a year per child, give or take a little bit. The Chamber of Commerce created a special award to recognize Mr. Huppenthal for his work in bringing Common Core, Arizona's college and career ready standards to Arizona, because we had to change the name of them to try to fool people. I'm sorry, it's time that we bring some truth and integrity back to our superintendent of public instruction office and let people know what needs to be done for their children. and just really briefly, in the few seconds that I have left, Generation Next, the science standards, Arizona, last I checked, we are on their website as a participating state, even though our State Board of Ed has never adopted them. And I know from talking to teachers that they are using them in the classroom. So how out of control is our State Department of Education?
Well, let's go through these one at a time. The Race to the Top grant. We did get a Race to the Top grant. My department used that Race to the Top grant for teacher training, $5 million a year. That's so infinitesimal that it's beyond belief. But we did a phenomenal job with teacher training. 86% of the teachers who came in, charter school teachers, district school teachers, rated the quality of our training as good or excellent. We distributed the other half of that funding out to the counties to provide local services to schools and school districts in their training. The feedback we got is that they did an excellent job too. The Race to the Top grant binds us to nothing. We are free right now to take any action we want with regard to our state standards. My concern is, and my concern has been steadily, is what is that action going to be? Is it going to be what Indiana did? I did refer to what Indiana did as the barbarians. They went out there, and everybody outside of Indiana thinks they got rid of Common Core. But when you talk to the experts, and I've talked to them, when you talk to Terrence Moore of Hillsdale College, everybody knows Hillsdale, incredible intellectual center for conservative thought. Terrence Moore thinks what they did was create a mess. They didn't get rid of Common Core at all. They just created a mess of their standards. You have a profound responsibility as superintendent of public instruction to guide this process in our schools through to a better place. What is that better place? We have these standards in place now, and some of them are good. Phonics, phonemic awareness, letter identification, teaching reading in kindergarten, that's a heck of a good standard. When somebody says, I'm going to tear Common Core out by its roots, are they talking about tearing Common Core out and replacing it with whole language? That would be ridiculous. I'm saying that what we would do would be thoughtful. We would keep the very best standards, and we would go through a series of evidentiary hearings, which Indiana did not do. We would go through a series of evidentiary hearings, maybe 8 sequentially, paced at 3 weeks apart, bringing evidence from many of the people I see in here. The Gaddies, who've done incredible work in education. We want them to come in and provide absolute evidence as to what we would do, where we're going to go with our college and career ready standards, so we can be confident that the very best standards for education for Arizona students. And this is what I do, this complex work. Been doing it for 20 years, been very successful at it. And I would put it up, and I would ask my opponent to say, what great accomplishments does she have? I have a huge semi-truck full of accomplishments. What confidence can we have over an alternative approach?
I'd like to answer Mr. Huppenthal's question. He asked, what is that better place? That better place, well, I'll tell you what that better place is not. It's not an education system that's controlled by the federal government where Washington, D.C. bureaucrats think they know better than we do what is best for our children. It is not a system that tells us how we must evaluate our teachers and compensate our teachers, how we must evaluate our schools, and it's certainly not a system that demands that we collect massive amount of data on our children to be shared with other states, for-profit companies, and the federal government. We can't change Common Core as long as we are in the Common Core system, because the standards are copyrighted. They don't belong to Arizona. Our standards were written by Arizonans. They were written by Arizona's teachers with input from Arizona parents. That did not happen with the Common Core standards. It was virtually done, I wouldn't say in the dead of night, but as if it were done in the dead of night, without public hearings, without public discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that for a fact because I was on the school board when that happened. We received a notice, oh, by the way, these might be put up for posting for people to observe this date, that date, maybe, maybe not. There were no public hearings. And to the point of our children, or excuse me, I'm sorry, our teachers. Under No Child Left Behind, and I don't agree with that federal program, I don't agree with any of the federal programs that have come down the pike because they're all unconstitutional and against federal law. But under No Child Left Behind, every single teacher had to become highly qualified in their content area, or in the case of Peoria, some that didn't want to go through that chose to leave and retire rather than go through all that recertification. Tell me, ladies and gentlemen, what has changed about arithmetic in eons that now teachers have to be retrained under Common Core standards? What has changed about the English language that we are spending millions and millions of dollars to retrain people who already know how to teach?
This next question, 60 seconds each. I'd like to follow up, Mr. Huppenthal, with the reference you made to the Race to the Top program. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to fully compete for Race to the Top money, states have to adopt standards common to multiple states, and only one set of standards fully meets that definition, and that's Common Core. Would you agree or disagree with that?
In order for states to have competed for the Race to the Top, they had to have college and career ready standards. And there were a number of states that said no to Common Core. And Arizona was one of 6 states in which we took advantage of the fact that they had customization for 15% of the standards. So as long as your standards were sufficient so that a student who achieved that standard could go on to some degree of success in college and career, you could pass. Texas adopted a college and career ready standards. A number of the states went down that path. We are under no obligation whatsoever, no copyright obligation, no statutory obligation, there is no obligation at all. We could take a new set of standards to our state board tomorrow, and they could adopt them, and there would be no penalties whatsoever, financial or whatever, to Arizona. The question is how do we determine what that place is going to be? I've already established we're not going down the science standards process, we're not going down the history standards process of any Common Core, and we are going to do a complete and thorough review of our math and English language arts standards so that we can make recommendations, and all of you, particularly those of you from the education establishment who are doing a great job educating our children, are comfortable with the standards that we adopt as a state.
Ms. Douglas?
Thank you. You're absolutely correct, Shane. The Race to the Top applications, we had to agree to adopt standards that were common to multiple states. The only standards that met that requirement were the Common Core standards, period. Here's a list of the states who applied for it. Some 47 originally submitted an application. You want to know the really sad part, ladies and gentlemen? Only 19 states were ever given any money for it. And if Mr. Huppenthal can go to the State Board of Ed tomorrow and have that process begun to change these standards, then I ask, why didn't he start doing that 3.5 years ago? Why are we only doing it now?
Well, my opponent is the very best example of why you need to pick the time for when you conduct your fight. My opponent could have stopped Common Core, could have stopped Race to the Top right in her own school board. She couldn't put together 3 votes to do it. I have an undefeated record when I do my fights. I defeated the federal government over and over again. I defeated them on the waiver. We didn't have to make any concessions on teacher evaluation to get our waiver. That's my record winning. My opponent just lost her vote when she was against Common Core for her school district. She just lost her vote when it was Race to the Top. She can wax poetic out on the campaign trail, but I'm the one who delivers victories. My opponent is the one who delivers defeats. I intend to win. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, would you like to respond?
I was the only school board member, to my knowledge, back in 2010 to make a motion to defeat Common Core. Clearly, that district, the first time that it came before our board, we were not asked whether we wanted to vote on the Race to the Top application. The superintendent just came forward and decided to listen to the discussion of the board. That's what they do when they don't want to take a vote. And he heard from 3 very liberal board members that they were fine with taking money from the federal government. 2 of us were very vocally opposed to it. Unfortunately, when May of 2010 came around and we had an opportunity to vote on it, I was right there to make a motion to stop it, that we not participate in the Race to the Top application. Unfortunately, no, we had not had another election at that point in time. That's how you affect change at the local level in your school board. When those people are not doing what you want them to do, you need to get into their face and tell them either we will vote you out of office or we will run against you and get you out of office. But unfortunately, there was an election between 2009 and 2010.
Ms. Douglas, we're going to go back to you. 2 minutes each on this particular question. Ms. Douglas, some have claimed that you are a one-issue candidate, that is, you only focus on Common Core. How would you respond to that claim?
Oh, I love to respond to that claim. First of all, Common Core, as I already talked, the Race to the Top application, what we had to have covered in our state application were 4 things. How we would teach our children with Common Core standards and how we would test our children. How we will evaluate and compensate our teachers. How we will evaluate our schools, and a massive data collection system that is just beyond belief, what it will take to fulfill the requirements of that data collection. And all the testing is computerized. So that will also drive our education spending in this state. Our children, our teachers, our schools, the data on our children and our spending. Is that one issue? No, I think that's multiple issues. But the true one issue of this election is who controls our education system. Is it parents and grandparents and the taxpayers, or is it people that want to make a small fortune off the backs of our children? That's the one issue of this election, and I will do everything within my power to make sure control goes back to the parents and back to the people who should be controlling the education of our children.
There are literally hundreds of education issues, and we've been very successful over the last 3.5 years at pursuing the decentralization of power through what we do. Let me give you an example. Every year, 200,000 students, families move from one school to another school. Our data system, unlike the balloon system and unlike those other systems, we give the parent ownership of their child's data. So that when their child moves from one school to another school, that school district, that door closes, they no longer own that data moves over to the next school. That teacher, those parents can go right into there and see every piece of data that the state has on them. This is a critically important sense, this data ownership by parents. We have participated in none of these consortiums of data sharing. We have none of these data issues that people have talked about in terms of gun ownership, party registration. None of that's on ours. We've gone out to the very best teachers in the state, and we've asked them, what information do you need to pursue excellence in your classroom? And well, that information is going to be available to every teacher with the touch of a button, and it's going to be available to every parent to inspect so that they know what's going on with their child's data, and there will be an immediate appeals route if they don't like the data that's in there. That's just one aspect. We have taken the computer system from 50% response availability for our schools to 100%. That took a massive effort. I had to bring in a CIO who was rated one of the top 100 in the nation, and we hugely reduced bureaucracy for our schools. We're now down to $300 per student, less administrative costs. In Arizona, that's $330 million of savings relative to other states in the nation. So that's just one aspect of what I've been able to accomplish with my skills as an administrator. My skills that have been developed over the last 30 years in situation after situation. We have the ongoing conflict down with the Tucson Unified School District. That is going to be a never-ending battle. I mentioned that I defeated them in state court, I defeated them in federal court. we're continuing to defeat them. We have to stay right on top of them. This is a never-ending battle with the federal government. You know you can have confidence in us because we've won these battles before and we're continuing to win them. Thank you.